Hi everyone, welcome to the Ecosystem Innovation video series. Today is part 2 of our Docusign Insight solution overview. Before we go into it, for anybody who hasn't seen the first part of the video, the link will be at the top. So you can hear my conversation with Steve Tucker to give you the background behind it. But today I'm going to be talking to my old friend Tim Seth, who I've known for quite a long time now, and he actually hired me when I started at Hubru a long time ago. So we go a ways back, and I've always had a lot of respect for what he's done in the space. So let's get you introduced to Tim. So hi Tim, thanks a lot for joining me today. I appreciate your time, my friend.
Yep, hi Mo, good to speak to you again. It's been a while, but we've done a few of these kind of working sessions together in the past, so yeah, looking forward to it.
Cheers. Before we start the demo, please do like, share, subscribe on the channel, and comment below. Give us your thoughts and opinions. Let us know if you find this interesting, and of course myself and then the Docusign team can also answer any questions. So let's dive into it. So today we're going to go through the Docusign Insight solution, and you're going to show us a real life, I'm going to say, scenario with the solution connected to Ariba, right, Tim?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the focus here is very much how Ariba and Docusign Insight work together, and it's one of those great partnerships really where both products are complementing each other. I mean, the people in the Ariba world will know an awful lot about their contracts today. They'll know how their workspaces are architected, and they'll probably remember some of the numbers. Day to day, they're going to actually understand which contract workspace numbers relate to the agreements that they manage. So what I want to do today is just bring a little spin on that and demonstrate to you how we can use AI to look across contracts that we may own and look for legal terms within them, and then focus in on those legal terms across possibly a single contract workspace. And we'll have a look at what the AI is doing, what it's finding, and how we can use that to compare and contrast language in, let's say, multiple different documents housed and managed within the same contract workspace agreement. So let's get into the demo, and I'll walk you through that. So here we are. We're in the dashboard in Docusign Insight, and this is a configurable dashboard that you can start to get and build some metrics around the contracts that you own and manage within Ariba. So you can set Docusign Insight up to only show you the contracts that are relevant to you in Ariba. So it can be based on the owner, for instance, or the team, security profile, in a very similar way to the way Ariba works. And you can focus that right down to only seeing those documents or seeing multiple different teams and users, depending on really what your security access needs to be.
And your dashboards there, Tim, you've got,
yeah,
I think we're going to talk about the force majeure one, but you've also got termination notice, governance. So do you, as a user, you can set this up to cover those particular things? And
yeah, exactly. So you can actually just change the filter here and select a different item. I've got a mixture on this dashboard of both AI extracted characteristics or features of the contract. So here, what we're seeing here is a breakdown of the termination notice periods across the different documents in the system. So most documents have a 30-day notice period, and there are very few of a 60 days. So this is based on AI. On the left here, we've actually got an Ariba field which we're bringing across from Ariba, and I've got a custom field called force majeure that has one of 4 different values for a workspace. So it's either with pandemic cover, no, required negotiation, or basic. And I've got a termination for convenience, so yes with no, or just yes. And I'm also picking out the governing law through AI as well. So I'm kind of just showing a generic dashboard, but featuring both Ariba data and AI-based data.
Yeah, and it just shows that and this is something that Steve and I were talking about. It's about drilling down to the next level and being able to capture that kind of information very easily for you to be able to see it, because I think that's one of the differentiators that Insight gives you, is the insight, no pun intended, that you can get into the contracts that are a little bit more complex if you're trying to do that with a solution like any other generic, I'm going to say, CLM solution that you get in the procurement suite.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's happening here is you're actually seeing data on the right-hand side represented graphically, which is AI identified normalized data taken directly from the pages of the documents you're housing with Ariba. So
right.
At this point, what's happened is the connector between the two applications has detected new or changed Ariba workspaces automatically. It's synchronizing the metadata from the workspace and the documents. It's then reading those images or photographs, OCRing them, processing the text through the AI engine, and then normalizing, in this case, governing law and termination notice. But we're going to see shortly how we can extract whole paragraphs from those either photographic images or PDFs or Word documents, whatever they are, housed within the workspace. So really you are drilling into information you cannot see anywhere else. This just doesn't exist in a normal CLM context.
Sure.
And these charts are dynamic, so I can pick on England and Wales, and these charts now alter, just like many other BI type solutions around.
Sure. Yep.
And that can be progressive. So in addition to the dashboard, we also have this ability to search. So this is really like it's almost like Google for your Ariba contracts. Maybe we shouldn't use the term Google, but it's ubiquitous in terms of a strong capability to search. Yeah. And for me, that term works pretty well. So if I'm just looking for, and let's focus on that force majeure example you mentioned. So I'm looking for which documents across all of my Ariba contracts that I manage do I actually have some language in there which relates to the legal term of force majeure. So we're not looking for an Ariba flag that's set yes or no, or with cover or not. We're expecting the application to have read the language and have detected a piece of text which, however it's written, is meaningful in the context of the force majeure. So it might just talk about, it could talk about coverage for the contract in a force majeure situation, and it mentions the word force majeure, but it could just be, in the event of a catastrophic disaster. And so the AI actually understands language very much like a paralegal. So let's go ahead and do that. And if I just start typing the legal term force majeure, what we start to see is every part of Insight, both synchronized data from Ariba and also automated extractions using the AI that relate to this term. And very often what we'll find is we're able to subcategorize within the AI. So we're not just looking for a bland force majeure coverage, but here you can see coverage which is specific to the recent pandemic we've had, the CV-19, or more generally, parts of language which relate to coverage for pandemics.
You can contextualize it. You can
yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly right, mate. You'll contextualize it, and we can dig deeper into that. But initially, if we just pick up on the force majeure language, we've picked up 20 contracts, and these 20 contracts are actual individual documents. So I mean, in front of us we've got our Ariba document IDs. Probably very few of you will remember those within your Ariba context, but you'll certainly remember your contract workspace ID. So this is data that's coming in from the Ariba platform with the connector, as is the supplier name, the status of the workspace, and also in many other fields of information as well. But now we've got down to this short list, if you like, of contracts. That's a really great thing about Insight, is that what it's doing is it's showing you how big the opportunity or the problem is. So it's fantastic at scaling. What do I need to find? When I can I now search for something to know how big the piece of work is for me to understand what force majeure coverage I have across my contracts. And we've done that instantaneously. We've now got 20 contracts out of maybe hundreds or thousands. We can drill a little bit deeper into this by picking a particular workspace, because that's probably where you start from, either by a supplier or workspace. It may vary, but we can use that guided search for that. And guided search here then will list out the different workspaces represented by the previous search. So it's iterative. We're drilling
Yeah.
down further and further each time.
Yeah.
So let's pick up on one of these. And now we have in our results table all 3 documents which are part of workspace 2218180 with their different documents IDs.
Mm-hmm.
What we'll do first is we'll just go into one agreement, and then we'll come back out of that and we'll look at how we can then compare terms. So we're just selecting an agreement. The first thing we're going to see is the representation of the document on the right. So this is now the, if it's an image, it's the OCR full document. If it's Word, it's just turned into a full readable, almost like single page of text. And the blue highlights, the blue-gray highlights are where the AI has actually picked up on a piece of information. So this agreement was executed on the 8th of April and 2004. And what it's going to do, it's going to normalize that date into a standard ISO date. It's going to recognize contracting parties. And as we sort of scroll further down, we start to find that we're actually seeing things like payment terms and refunds and all this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And on the left-hand side are what we call our labels. So these are either synchronized Ariba metadata labels and or context-related AI extractions, or a mixture of both. And we can filter those by logical category. So I've got my force majeure ones here. So on the left-hand side, we can see that this label of the Ariba force majeure came across from Ariba as saying it's just a basic force majeure clause. The ones below are the actual AI extractions, and we can get directly to those by just expanding these boxes. And here we can see the actual force majeure clause that has been identified by the AI, and you can jump to that straight away in the document. So if we just pause for thought. What we've just done there is, we've opened up Insight, we've looked across thousands of documents, tens or hundreds of workspaces, maybe thousands of those as well. We've looked for the presence of legal language. We've narrowed it down to a contract that interests me with a supplier that interests me. And we're now able to go in the main master agreement to the exact page and point where that legal language exists. And we've done that, in the demo over 3 or 4 minutes, but you're going to do that in seconds. So if you compare and contrast that with how would you do that today? Well, your only real choice is to do some kind of search, maybe, or certainly get a list of all your workspaces, then go to each document, then download the documents or get someone to download them in bulk for you, and then open each document and search and find if the documents are searchable. If they're photographs, you're going to have to read every document, and that's going to take days and weeks.
So I think the thing is, I mean, even if you could get the level 1 search, which you may well be able to get, right, or the level 0, which says is which contracts have force majeure in them, you would get that. But then if you want to then contextualize it and then find that information, that's where you get a bit unstuck, because this is what Insight does differently to your CLM solution. And what I mean, and whilst we're talking about Ariba here, it's not just Ariba that has this problem. I think it's any of the general CLM solutions have this kind of problem. That's what makes Insight so interesting.
Exactly right, Mo. And you're right that a level 0 search for the words force majeure may well bring up all the documents you're interested in with Ariba, because you can do that document text and the text search. But if it doesn't say force majeure in the contract, which it may not, you never know. So there's an alternative word for it. This is where the AI is going to substitute in, based on the fact that we've trained the AI with literally hundreds of thousands of documents over the last 10 years. And it's seen millions of documents. So it knows what a force majeure clause looks like and doesn't look like, irrespective of how it's written.
Right.
You can also drill into it and start to say, okay, well, is there a part of this clause that relates to a notice period? So yes, we're flagging it that it has a notice period included, and that notice period has a duration. So this is provided within 15 days of the evidence. And we can also see that there is a specific COVID-19 force majeure notice that's been pulled out by a different analytic. And this is the notice period here is actually been identified by that short piece of text.
Yeah.
So drilling down into one document kind of really gives you a sense of how this iterative progressive search works with an insight. But what you can actually do across your workspace, which is probably going to be more interesting in many cases, is to look at how does this document compare to this document. So in terms of comparison, what you're able to do is pick two or more documents, depending on the real estate size of your screen and resolution. I'll do 2. We can actually now compare and contrast. So what we see here is we have 2 different documents, part of the same agreement, that actually have different language.
Yeah.
For the basic force majeure clause. This second document actually has additional language to cover specifically in the case of an emergency, which the first document doesn't. So we're probably not able to easily identify the precedence of these documents in terms of which one out of these 2 that you've given us from your single workspace in Ariba is a parent or child, because that probably is the knowledge of the person who owns the contract. But what you're able to do quite easily is see and compare and contrast. So if you know that this is the later amendment or a complementary document which supersedes this one, you now know that this language is in force. And if the reverse is true, you know that this document may well be trumping this one. So this is where you can start to get a feel for what is different and what is the same across the different documents.
Yeah.
And this one, and here what we're actually doing is we're not just identifying that there is a notice period, we're actually extracting that as a specific piece of data. So this is where the AI has recognized the context of the words 15 days, and it's actually extracting that as the notice period as a number of days. So you actually get a specific data point, which is then easier to identify and reference. So, and this information is then exportable to Excel. People love Excel. We're never going to trump that one, I don't think.
No.
And when you're in one of those use cases where you need to start to understand or get help to understand, is what I'm trying to do enforceable or possible within the context of the contract, this is where this kind of information becomes absolutely invaluable. We're able to compare and contrast many different documents. You can also pick 3 as an example. And here we can see and just show the differences. So what it's showing is that these 2 are actually the same. This one's different. So across multiple documents, we're actually seeing, how 2 documents might have the same piece of language, but a third document has a different piece of language. So again, the ability to do that in a point and click, very quick way. There's nothing to see here, nothing to do. You don't need to, you may not need to export it, but just getting to that point is literally seconds to minutes. Within the Insight framework.
So it's the efficiency gains that you get from having the solution pull out that information for you in using AI, using machine learning, pull it together so that when because if you're in procurement and a scenario happens and you need to dive into your contract workspaces to find out the potential risk for the business, that's where this becomes a problem. And and what Stephen, it was a phrase that Steve had used was, it's what you don't know that is the problem. But then finding what you don't know, if you don't have this kind of capability, can be hours, days worth of work in order to get to where you need to be. And even then you could miss it.
And many people watching this video will have personal experience of exactly that question. There's a question asked of the business, either by internal compliance or an external regulator, or a freedom of information request, and the only answer to that is to wholesale move those documents out of their natural home, which is in Ariba, and send them off to a third party and pay huge sums for a contract review to get a spreadsheet back 3, 5, 6 months later that says, great, you sent me 46,000 documents and there were 19 that had the problem.
Yeah.
And that is really where, as Steve was saying, that's the power of insight, is to say, I don't know where things are. I can find 2 or 3 because I know 2 or 3, but I don't know where the rest of the, the 15 are.
Right.
I don't know how many there are. And this Insight will answer that question in the same way that the document review does, but it does it instantaneously. It kind of scales the problem. And yeah, we're full of anecdotes and stories around, people who even sat in a boardroom context answering these questions. One of the very common ones from 1819, when some regulation changed around small company payment terms being adhered to in terms of invoicing and being paid by large companies, was how many contracts do we have where we actually know what the real payment terms are for goods and services, and are we paying to those? So we can find out from SAP what we're paying. That's pretty simple. We know what we're paying because we measure that. We actually have that documented in SAP, but we don't know what the language says. So how many times does it say, we'll pay you within 60 days, but actually your aggregate time is 90, 120 or something else. And to get pulled up by something as simple as that by the regulator really is just, that's just embarrassing in some ways, because it's such a simple thing to check. And with Insight, it just gets even easier. So things like payment terms, again, you can search across your documents for specific payment terms, payment discount percentages, late fees, etc., and also what your payment terms might be set to in Ariba, and compare and contrast those as well. So if we look for payment terms here, one of the things you can actually do within Insight is not just look for the presence of that term, but look for where that particular paragraph that you've identified, or the AI's identified as a payment term paragraph, with additional information. So I can say payment terms where 30 is included in the text.
Right.
And what that's going to do, it's found 7 documents where 30 is included in the text. That's pretty interesting. So I can probably almost guarantee that every one of those documents I'm now looking at is 30 days. It's unlikely to be 30 months or 30 years, whatever. So I can pretty much guarantee that all of these have a payment term associated with them, which is 30 days.
But equally, you could just go in and compare right now like you did before, and it would highlight those areas anyway. So you would be able to kind of shortlist further if you wanted to, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you can also ask negative questions as well. So if I want to say, where does payment terms have the characters of 30 in, but we do not have Ariba _ payment terms. So every contract we have has an Ariba payment term, but does that include 30?
Right, okay.
Interesting. So now we have 2 agreements where the language of the contract states that the payment terms are 30 days, but our Ariba system is telling us that it's not 30 days that's selected on the contract. Isn't that it? I mean, so you can then build up a search term which is looking for quite complex things. So we're not looking for just 30 anywhere in the contract in our first part of this search argument. We're looking for 30 only in the context of payment terms.
Right.
So if we open one of these now and just make that comparison, we'll need to show all the labels for now. So we scroll down here to payment terms. Yeah, okay. So pay no later than 30 days within the date of invoice. So I'd guess that 30 was exactly related to that. If we now scroll up and look for our Ariba payment term, which is here, we actually say it's 120 days.
Right.
So isn't that interesting? So what we've actually identified exactly the kind of problem we were talking about just with one simple search. We've narrowed it down to those 3 documents. And again, for me, it's about, people say to me, is AI 100% right? Do you know what? It's probably not, but it's probably over-inclusive. So that means, yeah, if I get 3 answers back, probably all 3 are going to be right. If I get 300 back, if 2 of them aren't right because it's been over-inclusive and given me a false positive, I don't mind that, because I've only got 120 out of 120,000.
Right.
Insight's done the hard work. Insight's got me to 3 or 300, and that's good enough.
And that just saved you days and days and days of work of kind of trying to manually find that in any other fashion. And
exactly.
It's funny because you were talking about Excel earlier, and I know that there are organizations that will take some of these terms out and just hold it somewhere in a separate Excel, and then they have to reference an Excel, then they've got to go back. It's an absolute mess, and you've got to manage that, and who's managing that. And it's typically one person that's put that together that everybody else uses. That person leaves, and suddenly it's like, holy crap, nobody knows what's going on here. We're going to have to start from scratch again.
Exactly.
Whereas this is a document this is a system of record. It's giving you everything you need.
It is, and I think again, one of the questions we get asked a lot is, "Oh, this is great. Can we get all of this content back now searchable in our Ariba system?" And yeah, of course you could do that, but we looked earlier at the differences across a single workspace where language alters. Contract workspaces are very rarely static. They're going to have new documents, you're going to have amendments, you're going to have different versions of documents, and the connector will synchronize those multiple times a day automatically behind the scenes. It'll bring in the change metadata, it'll bring in the new documents, and you don't need to have that search capability that I've just shown you within Ariba real time, because what you need is the additional capability within Insight, not only to find the things you know about, but also maybe to start to find something you don't know about. What about something you've never thought of looking for before, and someone comes back and says, well, for your rental agreements, does every rental agreement that we have out there, does it have a clause that ensures that the landlord will ensure that the property is ours and we can live in there in a peaceful way? There's a piece of language in law that kind of casts that in place. You've never looked for that, you wouldn't know. And you can define that really simply in Insight by just highlighting a paragraph, assigning it as a new AI example, and then the system will go away, it'll reread around pre-existing documents in Insight, maybe 100,000 documents in a working day, and it'll give you those answers by the morning. It'll start to do it progressively, but it'll finish that process by the morning. So a brand new question you've never asked across multiple documents, that's incredible to think you can get that within 24 hours. And that's really why you don't need to have all of this AI-based information living within the Ariba platform, because you can't house it on those screens very comfortably anyway. I mean, the Ariba screen is designed to run the procurement organization. It's not designed as a linguistic. Imagine if you started to put things like paragraphs of text like this in the middle of Ariba. That screen would be absolutely enormous. The real estate isn't built to work like that. So we house the AI answers with an Insight. We allow the refinement and creation of new models, and the models are effectively AI searches and extractions from documents. And the connector will, as I said before, it'll synchronize behind the scenes, invisibly to the end user, all the new content and changes based on when a Ariba contract workspace is modified. So if you just change a piece of metadata, we're going to receive that, because the last date change will be reset within Ariba. We sense that from a connection perspective, and automatically bring that across. If new documents or new versions are shown, we'll also see that. So as your document versions grow, you're going to have old and new versions of the same document available to you for this search.
Yeah, and I think just to cover that off as well, I think the other aspect, of course, is that whilst this demo has been about the Ariba connector and how that works, together. Insight is also looking at contracts that aren't always that don't fit in the Ariba context. They'll be fitting in other areas of the business, and that's where, if you're looking at a particular scenario, yes, you can look at it within the Ariba contract workspaces, but you can also look at it across all of the contract workspaces that are not only Ariba specific, but other aspects as well. So
yeah, I mean, there's an integration to Salesforce, for maybe commercial contracts. There's the ability for you to house. We have our own kind of synchronized cloud storage for contracts that may live in other parts of your organization, like legal contracts, or you can simply use the upload feature. So upload feature really allows you just to drag and drop from your desktop and say, yep, I want to have a look at these documents, and they could be templates. So imagine a scenario where, oh, there's a new statement of work template comes out. How many of my existing agreements have the right language? So you can now just drag and drop that template into Insight. It'll load in a couple of minutes. It'll be processed by the AI, and it's available to you to compare and contrast, like I showed earlier. So yeah, it's good. Good point. Well made. Mo, that we have talked about this in the context of Ariba, but if we look at many of our customers, there's a very large oil and gas customer that we both share, and we help them deploy 19 implementations of a single Ariba platform around the world over about 3 or 4 years, and that really involved consolidating 5 external huge existing document systems that had over 1 million documents in. And what Insight allowed them to do was, they got that number of documents down from nearly 1 million documents to around, I think it's 96,000.
Right.
So the duplicates they had and the documents that were no longer valid, that they could cleanse from those old systems using the AI capabilities with an Insight, really meant that they didn't need to have all that information. And the more information you hold today, and the more documents you hold, and the length that you hold them for, that's just a bigger and bigger burden from a GDPR perspective. Because the minute you start to hold more and more content, if you're holding 15, 20 years of contracts, how many of those can you actually relinquish and guarantee that have been destroyed? And that was really a big part of that work. So to actually help them to synchronize those documents from multiple sources, and then we did a piece of work to actually push the content of Insight into their brand new Ariba system, and we populated, like I say, whatever it was, 46,000 workspaces or something, over 19 deployments. So yeah, again, point well made that it can be documents from any source at all.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Tim. I thought that, thank you for that overview, because I just wanted to get that context. It's often easier to talk about it rather than when you show it, it kind of brings it together. So that's been really useful. Anything else that you want to cover in terms of the solution? No,
I think we'll have an opportunity another day to talk about how new AI models are built, because that's a subject where people always say, "Oh, how long does it take?" And maybe we'd like to do another short demo somewhere we pick a topic and create one. But for today, I think we're good for the demo for now. I think the message really is, if you can't find it, how can you use that information? And just like with Google, what I'll close on is that some people get great at searching with Insight. They actually understand. They get a feel for what the AI is doing, what kind of information they can use, and they get really good at quite complex searches. And the great thing is you can save those and share them with other people. So, if you're going to have your search gurus, which people always have, application, sort of leaders, if you will, within organizations, they're able to save these searches and these label views and then share them out to people. So really, you've got on your desktop the things you're interested in, only the documents you care about, and the relevant searches to help you do, help you run the business.
Yeah. Cool. So brilliant. Thanks a lot, Tim. I appreciate that. That's been really useful. If anybody's got any questions, please do comment below or reach out to either Tim or I. I've put our contact details into the description of the video. We'll be happy to kind of pick up any questions or have a further conversation on this. And yeah, Tim, I think I'm going to take you up on that offer of another vid, because I think it would be good to talk about AI models and how they work, because I think not everybody understands that. I could certainly learn something from that too. So
yeah, and the big, the interesting thing there, hopefully, for people is take some of the mystery out of it. Let's say we have a one-shot learning type approach to our AI model building, and it'd be great to get a chance to show you how that works.
Awesome, brilliant. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good to
All
talk.
right. See you again. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.